Hi, yes, my name's Mary Crowder. I'm a researcher in Sheffield at the School for Health and Related Research, and one of the researchers working on the project that we're going to kind of talk about today. And I've been the PPI lead on the children, young people and families work packages that we've been working on for the last couple of years. That's me. My colleague Naomi, pass over to you.
Hi, I'm Naomi Griffin and I work on the same team as Mary. But I'm based in Fuse, the Centre for Translational Research. And we're going to talk today about working in partnership with youth organisations in our research. We also have Ellie Holding here and Pip Kyle, who are also part of the team that me and Mary work on, which is part of a bigger team of researchers. So I'm going to speak on behalf of the whole team today. I just want to thank you all for listening in advance. Our presentation is about working in partnership with youth organisations to engage with young people during the pandemic. Now, it being during the pandemic was not something we thought would happen, so we'll talk about that a little bit. But yes, so there I am, Naomi Griffin, and then Mary Crowder's on there too. And yes, we'll hopefully answer some questions. Ellie and Pip might get involved in the questions later if we have time. Yeah, next slide, please, Mary. Great, yes. So as I said, we're part of a team of researchers from the University of Sheffield, from Fuse and from London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, working on the SPHR Children, Young People and Families programme. Participation and co-production are integral to our approach, and throughout the project we've worked with AYPH and Chili Pep, who you're going to hear from in a moment, who are our practice partners with expertise in engagement and co-production with children and young people, and they've been excellent. So yeah, in this presentation, we're going to share learning from our experiences of working with these youth organisations to engage young people in the research during a pandemic. Next slide, please. So our research, the research project, which is still ongoing, is exploring young people's understandings of health inequalities and their priorities for change. Our methods involve collecting qualitative data through a series of 3 linked focus groups with young people, and we recruited those through youth organisations, and we used a variety of creative and engaging activities throughout the data collection. But today we're going to focus on the public involvement and engagement activities that help to shape the methods that we used. But we believe that many of the lessons that we learned through partnering with young people's organisations are equally applicable to data collection activities. Next slide. Okay, so this slide gives the context for the specific public involvement and engagement activities that we're going to talk about, and emphasises our view that input from the public and from children and young people is valuable at all stages of the research. We had an overall PI, I'm going to just start saying PIE rather than public involvement and engagement. We had an overall PIE plan developed early on and kept live throughout, and that included when and how we thought PIE would be valuable and which groups of young people would be best placed to help on different aspects of the project. We worked with our practice partners to agree a shared set of principles for engaging and working with children and young people. And this helped build confidence and trust across the team. And these principles have now been formalised into a document that is available on the SPHR website. And Pip is about to, or has just posted a link to that, thanks Pip, in the chat. So yeah, please do go and have a look at that if you're interested. Yes, so we worked with our colleagues at the Association for Young People's Health to identify the ethical and methodological issues that we might encounter when researching sensitive topics with children and young people, and to develop focus group activities designed to be engaging for young people, as well as effective data collection methods. We had begun drafting guides for a series of 3 linked data collection sessions to be run with each of the 6 different groups of young people from 3 different areas in England, with a particular emphasis on including young people from socio-economically deprived areas. We had identified 6 children and young people groups involved in research advisory groups and our previous research who might be interested in supporting research. So young people who'd already had some involvement in research before and could help us to guide our methods. We had a flexible arrangement in place with Chili Pep, backed with a dedicated budget, which is important, to support the development and implementation of PIE activities with children and young people across the life of the project. This built on a long-standing relationship working with Chili Pep. Mary's worked with Chili Pep for a long time, and turned out to be very beneficial arrangement for the research team. And we hope Chili Pep too, you'll hear from them soon. So as you can hear, it was all going beautifully, going really, really well. We were all set to go, and we were setting up, we were working on our ethics application. Luckily, we hadn't quite submitted it yet. And then, Mary, next slide, COVID. Suddenly, we were faced with a lot of new challenges as a result of COVID-19. Had lots of implications for our project, namely that we planned to do the data collection face-to-face, and we no longer could do that, although that became a bit more complicated, which we'll hopefully have time to discuss. So yes, lots of new challenges. We had delays in when the project started, which did affect some of our plans for co-production activities. None of the researchers had experience of running online focus groups. And at that point, we'd barely heard of Zoom, Teams, or Google Meets. So we were just getting our heads around that. We didn't know if the data collection activities we had planned for face-to-face groups could really be translated to work well online. The prospect of online delivery raised a lot of concerns around building rapport and maintaining young people's interests. We weren't sure if the young people would even be willing to participate online, and would they stay engaged throughout the sessions or across the 3 linked sessions, knowing that they'd be online. There was issues we'd already identified around appropriate language and framing of discussions for sensitive topics, safeguarding and supporting participants, which were suddenly magnified by this shift to online. And at a practical level, we had to work out how recruitment would work in this new context, how to get consent and parental consent, and making sure the payment incentives work in a socially distanced setting. We weren't sure how many facilitators we would need, how many participants would work in an online setting, and how long an online session can really go on for. So, Mary, could you put the next slide? Thank you. So, what we did about this, we looked at options for how our PIE partners and contacts might be able to help us work through some of these challenges. We worked with the Association for Young People's Health to develop focus group plans that we thought could work online or work as well online. With the 3 linked focus groups that was still our plan, was to do 3 linked focus groups with each group of young people and use participative mapping activities, newspaper articles and youth-led discussions within that context. And we worked with them to work out how we can make sure that that would work in an online setting. We also approached the Young People's Advisory Group in the Northeast to ask if they would be interested in using one of their regular sessions to help us out. And we asked the young people for their views on appropriate language specifically for discussing sensitive topics related to health and potentially stigmatizing topics, and tested out using news articles as discussion points about health and health inequalities. And that worked really well. And we also asked the young people for feedback on that, which was really, really helpful. So with the help of a youth organisation we had worked with before, we reconvened a group of young people who had taken part in participatory mapping sessions for a previous SPHR research project. In an online session, we were able to give a progress update on the research they had been involved in and get their views on participatory mapping as a useful tool for discussing health and health inequalities. So we knew that it was worth pushing this forward in an online context. These sessions with young people were extremely helpful in refining the focus group plans, but we still had a lot of uncertainty. The young people we had spoken to were not really representative of the types of young people we were wanting to include in the data collection. They tended to be from less disadvantaged backgrounds and already engaged with issues relating to young people's health and health inequalities, and also have some understanding of research and having been involved in research previously. We'd also gained limited insights into whether we could successfully build trust and rapport that would make young people feel comfortable to discuss sensitive topics, maintain engagement over time, and implement effective systems for supporting and safeguarding the young people in an online context. Oh, you're ahead of me there, Mary, thank you. You're on it. So methods pilot. This is where the flexible arrangement with Chili Pep really came into its own. The PIE budget paid for Chili Pep's participation worker to work with the researchers to promote the PIE opportunity to young people in our target group, to recruit young people for a full practice run of the 3 focus group sessions, which was incredible, including hosting the sessions on the platform that was most familiar with the young people. That was the approach we decided to take. So we had to get our head around various different platforms for doing the focus groups. So we worked with them to develop and test systems for safeguarding and supporting young people during and after the online sessions. They hosted and supported the sessions and helped to facilitate. They provided advice and feedback on a whole range of things, including optimum duration of the session, because it was important that it not go on for too long, but we needed to make sure we collected enough data at the same time. The length of time between sessions, which did vary a little based on the groups, but that's once we get to the data collection, sorry. How to use the breakout rooms, the optimum group size for these discussions, and activities that we could use to develop relationships and trust with the young people. And they helped us to obtain and collate anonymous feedback from the young people, which again was really, really helpful. So next slide. So yeah, we just wanted to go through some of the benefits of using this partnership approach, sorry, and how it helped to improve our methods in the next phase of the project. The young people were amazing in the participation. The partnership approach brought more benefits than we could have hoped. We've got so many lessons that we learned from this that we took forward into the data collection phase, and it really improved. We feel it really, really improved our data that we collected. As anticipated, the PIE pilot helped us to improve our methods and develop our skills and confidence in delivering virtual focus groups, to understand the amount of time, number of researchers, etc., that is needed when we're doing the these data collection methods online, and the increased importance of balancing the time needed to build rapport and relationships with children and young people against the demands of data collection. We got practice in explaining and exploring health inequalities in ways that are meaningful and accessible to children and young people. We used children and young people's responses and feedback to refine our data collection plans. We were able to develop and test processes that could be carried forward to data collection and give us confidence that children and young people would have access to real-time and follow-up support if needed, and that safeguarding procedures were robust. We were able to identify potentially tricky situations that might arise when discussing sensitive topics. For example, the discussion of age-inappropriate topics for some group members based on age differences within the groups. And we explored in a workshop led by the Association for Young People's Health how we would respond to some of these, to develop strategies for how to respond appropriately. Next slide. So perhaps less anticipated by the research team was what we learned about the benefits of involving youth workers in the whole data collection process. A youth worker who has an existing relationship with the young people is much better placed to promote engagement opportunities in a youth-friendly way and manage recruitment, to use knowledge of young people to allocate breakout rooms, encourage participation in ways appropriate to the individual young people, to suggest prompts of known relevance to participants, to spot signs of discomfort and be alert to potential triggers, and to take the lead on safeguarding in line with their organisation's procedures, to follow up if a young person leaves the session unexpectedly, and this helps to avoid researchers needing to take any contact details of young people, to offer support to young people as they are more likely to contact a trusted person during or after a session than researchers that they've not known very long. And the youth worker has knowledge of support services if required, particularly within the area that the young people live. And they help to maintain engagement over time, reminding young people about upcoming sessions, reassuring and encouraging during and between the sessions. And all of this informed the written agreements we went on to create with youth organisations involved in the data collection phase. So it was really invaluable. We can't know for sure if the young people were more engaged as a result of the involvement in their youth. yeah, so that's okay. we can't know for sure if young people were more engaged as a result of the involvement of their youth workers, but our experience suggests that engagement was extremely good in both pilot and data collection sessions. The young people engaged well with the activities and appeared confident and comfortable to share their views, and in some cases they shared personal stories. Rapport and trust developed across the sessions, and young people reported that they enjoyed the sessions, and the majority indicated that they were interested in being involved in other phases of the project to come. Perhaps most telling of all is that we had almost no dropouts between the first session and the third session in any of the 6 groups of young people involved in data collection. And that's despite them spending all day on Zoom every day for school. Yes, next slide, please, thank you. So yeah, lessons learned. The voluntary community sector and youth organisations in particular can do things that researchers would find very difficult. Engaging with young people is what youth workers do, and they are very good at it. Involvement of youth workers and trusted adults can enhance the data collection sessions, even with researchers that are very skilled in working with young people. Engagement is what they do, and they are trusted by the young people, and that's really important. Realistic budget there. It's really important to have a really realistic budget and to fully understand the amount of budget that is needed to support the work of youth workers. Our research would not have been as powerful without the ability to call on youth worker time to help support our data collection. It's really important to be flexible, to allow time for youth workers to respond and give them time and resources to be able to respond properly. They know what is possible and realistic, and we need to make it as easy as possible for them to be involved and to help the research to the best of their abilities. And it's really important to invest time in building long-term relationships with PIE partners in the voluntary and community sector. And it's really important to look for mutual benefits, okay? So not exploitation, making sure no one's being exploited, but there's a beneficial aspect to the partnership for both, or for all parties involved. So just to end on the point that it's important to remember that as researchers, we're asking youth workers to do something that we would find very hard to do. They're bringing a skill set and a relationship with children and young people to the PIE activities. And if not more important, these skills are as important, if not more important, than the researcher skills, if you really want to know what young people think. So even if you're very skilled at facilitation, interviewing, and you're really good at building rapport, without the youth workers, you may well struggle to gain trust and rapport or get the levels of engagement that we were able to achieve in this research project, which have really given us an insight into the young people's lives that we're working with. It's really important to treat each other as partners, make the systems that you're using as straightforward as possible for them, because as we know, youth workers don't have a lot of time. They're already very stretched. And to think about how to best explain the research and introduce the research, and to talk to youth workers about what methods would be best to use. And finally, it's really important to get as early contact as possible, have as long lead times as possible to develop relationships and secure trust with youth organisations, youth workers, and also the young people, and make sure there's plenty of time to explain the research, provide the information that is important, recruit and obtain consent and parental consent, and to make sure that all of the information there is as easy to understand as possible, and to make the lives of your partners, the partnership workers that you're working with, as easy as possible. Okay, so that's all from us today.
Hello everybody, my name is Emma Rigby and I am the Chief Executive of the Association for Young People's Health, and I'm going to do a bit of a double act with Leslie from Chili Pep, who will introduce herself in a minute, and AYPH and Chili Pep, as Naomi talked about, have worked together as partners in different ways on the project that you've just had presented. It was a really great presentation, and we are just so passionate at AYPH about this model of working with youth sector organisations, youth workers who have trusted relationships with young people in order to create really, really good research. So we have a lot of experience of working with research teams ourselves and also facilitating other youth organisations to work with them. I'll just tell you a little bit about AYPH. We are a national UK-wide charity who focus on the health and well-being of 10 to 25-year-olds. We do a lot of work on participation. We also do a lot of work on gathering research and evidence. We just launched our Youth Health Data Hub the other week, which is a compendium of data about what's happening in young people's lives. We have worked together with Sheffield, Uni, LSHTM and Fuse from the beginning on this project. So Leslie and I have planned this presentation together. It's about getting participation right with young people and our learning from voluntary sector partners. I guess there are a huge number of things that we could have put in this presentation. We haven't really focused on the online and COVID implications of this kind of work, but we're happy to answer questions about that. But what we have focused on is the learning that we've had as experts in different ways of working with research teams to support meaningful young people's engagement. The first part of the presentation will look at what participation can feel like for young people and how to get it right, some key messages. And then the second part is going to focus on the perspective of being in a voluntary sector organisation and also some of the benefits of getting right. And a lot of those messages really link into the presentation that Naomi has just given. So that's my hello, and I'm now going to pass on to Leslie.
Thank you. Thanks, Emma. Hi, everyone. I'm Leslie Pollard. I'm Managing Director of Chili Pep, Children and Young People's Empowerment Project. We're based in Sheffield and Barnsley and tend to work mostly in kind of South Yorkshire, although we have been involved in national projects and programmes in a whole range of different ways. We are fundamentally an organisation that's focused on empowering young people to have a voice, and that's in a whole range of different ways, whether it's around having a voice in research, such as these projects that we've been involved in, having a voice in their communities, having a voice around the issues that affect them in their lives, and having a voice around services and service improvement. So over the years, we've done lots and lots of work around involving young people in things like commissioning, training young commissioners to be involved in commissioning services alongside other commissioners, co-production, and as I say, sometimes on a local level and sometimes on a national and regional level. So we've been doing kind of that's what we are. We're a participation organisation, and it's all about not just giving young people a voice, but actually making sure that they have an opportunity to influence and impact the things that are happening in their lives that affect them. And I guess research is a really good way of doing that, because if they can kind of influence how research is done to make sure that, you know, young people are engaged in it meaningfully, then hopefully they can impact, you know, what the outcome is. Yeah, so that's us, I guess. So could we move on to the next slide? Thanks. And I think we wanted to talk to you first really about kind of what this feels like for young people. We've in the last, since COVID, we've been approached by something like 8 different researchers across universities in Sheffield and in other areas to involve young people in lots of research that kind of got sparked through COVID about what the impact was for young people, as well as already engaging in this project that was set up long before COVID. And I think, you know, what we find is that for young people, this can often feel like a bit of a, wow, you know, this is really intense questions that we're being asked. This is really personal. This is really difficult to talk about. And I guess it's really important that they have a trust in that process, and that they trust that what they're being asked, you know, will be kind of taken seriously. And that they have someone who they can kind of believe will make that a safe place for them to begin to share all of that information. Young people can often feel quite embarrassed because research is often asking them about things that are there's a lot of research around poverty, the impact of poverty, health inequalities, and all of that can kind of, you know, it kind of can make young people feel like it's embarrassing for them because this is stuff that's, you know, that they don't really want to talk about. And some young people have experienced, you know, real trauma in their lives, or, you know, real kind of mistrust of some of the services and some of the institutions that they come into contact with. So kind of digging that up can be really difficult. And so it is really, really key that, you know, that we kind of understand that and make sure that we make a safe place for young people to have those conversations. They often feel like, you know, people are kind of parachuting into their lives, coming and asking them all these really intense and personal questions, and then go off and take that information into the ether. And what's really, really important is that we find ways to make sure that young people know what's happened with the information that they've shared, and what difference that's made, you know, because they're kind of giving all of this out, and they need to know, have I actually made a difference? Has this had an impact? Is anything better for other young people as a result of me getting involved in this? And I mean, I think Naomi's really covered it really well, talking about how it's really important to have that leading and build up time to make sure that we get all of those questions kind of right, because it can feel like there's a lot of questions that are being asked even before they start, you know, wanting to know about their demographics and their lifestyle and, you know, all of this personal information. So getting that kind of, you know, taking that into account is really, really important. Can we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. So I guess the value of coming and working with organisations like ourselves really is about helping you as researchers to think through all of that, and to try and get those processes right. And the key thing for us as organisations is just making sure that there's actually enough time to take all of that into account, and so it can be planned really, really carefully, and that we can make it a meaningful experience for young people. Sorry, I've just lost my thread there. I think it's really important to remember that young people have lives outside of, you know, what they might do with us as an organisation. Young people come to us for maybe 2 hours a week out of their life, and outside of that they've got loads and loads of other things going on, whether it's school, college, work, relationships, family, you know, hobbies, friendships, and lots of things that they might be dealing with, very kind of complex things that might be going on for them in their lives. And so making their engagement with us is, you know, kind of have some meaning for them and some benefit for them is really, really important. And then when we're asking them to engage with other organisations, we have to make sure that, you know, that those organisations kind of understand and have that kind of empathy with what young people are bringing into this activity that they're being asked to be involved with. And so kind of before you even start bringing young people into the process, getting those things around what we're asking them, what the questions are that we're asking them, making sure that all of those things around demographics, consent and ethics are all kind of done in a way that's you know, most appropriate and proportionate for what we're actually getting them engaged in. Another important thing around getting it right is, I guess, understanding that, and I think Naomi really kind of talked about this, that whole wraparound that needs to happen to support young people to engage in what for you might just be one focus group, but for us is a huge amount of kind of time and resource and investment in those young people to get them to that space, and what they might need to be able to engage in that process of what might be, you know, a 2-hour session for you, but for us could be a 3-month piece of work. And it's also building on what might have been, you know, a 6-month or a year or a 2-year relationship that we have with those young people, that means that they can come to that space and be able to be really open and honest and know that they'll get the support that they need. And then there's also kind of recognising the contribution that young people are making, and you know, providing something that incentivises them. And that's not necessarily about money, although we always kind of give them vouchers, don't we, Mary? Because, you know, that's a really nice way of recognising and valuing the time that they're giving. But it can be a whole range of different things, but just kind of recognising that they are giving up their time to kind of contribute to this, and that we reward that in some way, whether that's, you know, vouchers or activities or all kinds of stuff that we might do. And as I was saying before, you know, really making sure that within that process that there is a real intention and commitment to coming back and feeding back to young people about what's happened with the information that they've given you, or the, you know, the kind of end result, and what difference that's made. Because for young people giving up their time and being involved in that process, they need to know, you know, what you've done with that, and where that, you know, where that's going, and if that's made any real difference. And I was thinking about the stuff around COVID, you know, and it was really interesting because for us, we were also, you know, we'd never been in that world. You know, we didn't engage with young people on Zoom or, you know, have a virtual relationship with young people. All of our relationships as youth workers are based on that kind of, you know, very face-to-face, you know, relationship building that needs to happen, you know, in a, or, you know, we always thought needed to happen in that kind of, you know, face-to-face environment. And we all had to kind of respond to the pandemic really quickly and find different ways of engaging with young people and, you know, and to keep them engaged, and bearing in mind that for them what was going on was their schoolwork was going online, their friendships were going online, their relationships were going online, their services were going online. So everything was online for them. And some young people don't have the resource to be able to even just have that, because, you know, if they haven't got a laptop, if they haven't got a phone, if they haven't got, you know, access to the internet, they couldn't even access it in the first place. But even with those things, this was a very different world for young people, and all of the anxieties and stress and worry that they were had around COVID, you know, whether they're, you know, worrying about their parents or their families or their grandparents or themselves, you know, and having to deal with that social isolation. So then engaging them in a research project and kind of keeping them engaged on top of that, you know, it was difficult. And, you know, it's just that kind of understanding. We all kind of had to work out, can we do this? Can we keep them engaged? Can we, you know, can we build that rapport and relationships? And I think, you know, we had to very quickly work out what's the most creative ways of doing this. How can we do this? You know, and I take my hat off to my staff team who are far more technologically advanced than I am, but we're able to do that. You know, we're able to come up with those methods and tools and platforms and techniques. Okay, next slide, over to you, Emma.
Thanks, Leslie. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. I was just going to say, I think that's really, really important what you're saying. And I think one of the things I think about is that however important a question I have for a young person or a researcher has for a young person is in the work that we're doing, it just might not be the most important thing for that young person in their life at that point. And often what we're doing is thinking about what is best for those young people and thinking and making sure we're asking appropriate questions. Oh, now the slides are frozen. Oh, just to help me out with my, oh, there we go. There we are. It worked in the end. Good. So I am just going to talk about a little bit about the perspective of voluntary sector organisations, what it can, the kind of context that we are coming from, I guess. And I guess one of the things is that there is, as often small organisations, we are squeezing whatever research project we're talking about in particular into a whole lot of other things that are going on for the organisation. So that's all of the other projects that are being run and juggled by the organisation, but also the other things that the young people want to focus on. And when you're running youth groups or ongoing youth engagement groups, those young people will have their own priorities. And what part of the role of our organisations is to make sure we're sustaining their engagement by ensuring that we're focusing on things that are important to them. And this speaks to me somewhat to the importance of young people being involved in the development of the research question, so that we ensure from the very beginning that these are relevant and pertinent things to those young people. The orange bubble is really talking about our kind of, we know as voluntary sector partners, and Leslie and I have had some great chats about this, that we've got to get it right for the young people. They are, you know, who we are set up to serve, but we also got to get it right for our organisation, because these kinds of research projects link to so many other things that we're doing and to our core charitable purposes. And I think this isn't an issue that is not felt by universities and research teams, of course it isn't, but it is something of understanding those different contexts and how we need to, and that's where that kind of that relationship building between us as voluntary sector partners and the research teams that we're working with is really important. And then the third thing really speaks to some of the points that Naomi was making, and I think Leslie's touched on as well, is that often the time it takes to set up youth engagement is not fully recognised in either the funding or the project plans. And we know it's complicated and we know it's difficult to define, but that recruitment, that planning takes a lot of time and is fundamentally important to getting that engagement right. And it's often the bit that what we focus on is the delivery, the actual time that you're going to speak to the young people, and in that planning is so important to getting that right. In fact, it may be even more important in some respects. So if you get it right, then there's a lot of benefits to that. And I think that first point is really key. So you can have a trusted, critical friend who is involved in all aspects of the project, not just in the patient and participation involvement and engagement, and something that can be sustained. And that sustained relationship can be different depending on whether you're a more local organisation or national organisation or the kind of role that you're playing. But certainly I feel like we have developed a really positive relationship with the universities in this particular project. And it's not always an easy relationship. It is something where we have to deal with challenges, deal with different perspectives, come to agreement, understand each other's perspectives. But if you can do that work, then you can have a really positive relationship that improves the research that we're doing. And I've probably just covered the third point on the slide by talking about the first one. The second one is really that approach to safeguarding. So as Naomi said, we delivered a facilitated session for the research team in the early part of the process to look at some of the safeguarding issues that could arise, and we have all of our organisations have those clear safeguarding procedures in place, particularly to focus on this type of engagement. And I think the other thing that the youth worker model does is also think about what happens after you've run a session. So if you run a session with a young person and then a safeguarding issue comes up 2 weeks or a month later that is related to that research conversation or focus group, the youth worker model, that model of working with a trusted organisation, can ensure that that young person knows where to go, and that safeguarding issue can both be dealt with via the procedures of the local organisation and also flagged to the research organisation as well. And that those safeguards are really fundamentally important in this model. And fundamentally, I think, I mean, we're just really passionate that if we want to get young people engaged in research, if we do it in the way of working with trusted organisations, then it leads to better research. And I think that is particularly the case for groups of young people who are marginalised, groups of young people who face all kinds of particular challenges in their lives, and we want to understand their perspectives, but we can only really do that if we have those relationships with them. And now we're going to share this next slide, Leslie, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess some of our key reflections, and I feel like we're kind of focusing on the issue around kind of funding and support for us as organisations to do this, but I think it's because it's so integral in that, you know, for us to be able to engage in these processes as organisations, you know, I'll give you an example. There was one university who I won't name, but who kind of approached us and said, we're doing this £1.5 million research project, and it's really, really crucial to us that we have real co-production involvement of young people. And so we've allocated £10,000 to you to be able to fund this work. And I think that kind of spelt out, I guess, how can be a disconnect between the kind of commitment to doing it and an understanding of what it actually really kind of costs for us to do it. So I think there's a real, you know, just to kind of really understand that, as Emma was saying, you know, it isn't just about that 2-hour session that you might be going to do with young people, or that group that you might want us to run once a month for 12 months. There's a whole range of costs for us as organisations, and we're all charities. And so there is no one funding my time today to be here because it's not part, well, there is actually, because they have funded us to get involved in, because it's kind of just a kind of a nominal amount of money to be able to fund the actual delivery stuff. All of the stuff around planning and organising and our time doesn't kind of get factored in. I mean, Emma and I were saying, you know, the time that we've spent in meeting, discussing, planning, doing this presentation, that's all kind of organisational time that needs to be factored in, and the follow-up time that, you know, you might spend with young people. And so what we tried to do last year was to say to some of the universities, rather than just kind of fund a one-off and get a one-off project or one project, perhaps try and think about having a kind of more coordinated way of doing this, and fund posts within organisations such as ours that are research posts that can then work across the university, across the departments, with other universities, but that's actually dedicated to it. Because what happens for us is we get these requests in, and then we just kind of pile it on top of our staff's existing work and say, can you engage in this, or can we carve out a couple of hours out of your time to do this work? And then it kind of grows, because all of these other things happen and they need to kind of engage more. I have to say that with this project, that hasn't been the case, because it has been quite well funded in terms of our time. But I think in general, there's a bit of a misunderstanding about what the real cost is, I guess. And so having that more strategic approach to working in partnership with organisations, and really kind of thinking, when you're putting those research proposals in, let's talk to the organisations and see what this will really cost if we do this properly. Would say, well, it would be much richer in terms of what we'd be able to give, and and what you'd get back for that, I guess. Yours is the last point, I think, Em.
Yeah, and I'm not going to focus too much on time because we've talked about that. I'm just going to say that point about expertise is really key, and I think that youth worker model really that Naomi talked about highlights it, that expertise is really important to deliver good engagement work, and that is something that many organisations have. And if we understand and recognise that on an equal footing with some of the other aspects of expertise that are involved in a research project, that makes for a better outcome. And I think that's it. So I think the
last thing I'd want to say is just that having working with researchers who do have experience and understanding of the voluntary sector, and have, Mary kind of worked with us for years as a volunteer. I know that some of the other research team have worked with youth organisations, and having that expertise within the team really meant that the research team, we didn't have to sell it to them, because they did get it, they did know, they understood, and that was really, really helpful.
Okay, great. So that's us. We'll stop.